Hello everyone, my name is Chris Rippey, and today it is my privilege to present Kora master, cellist, and composer Tunda Jegede. Today's program is presented by the Autumn Salon and is part of our growing archive documenting the great arts from around the world. Your donation will go towards Tunda Jegede and towards making programming like this possible. You'll see the donation button below the video. And now, without further preamble, I present Tunda Jegede. Thank you so much for being with us today, Tunda. Thank you for being here.
Oh, no problem.
Could you tell us a little bit about the instrument that you're playing?
Yeah, the instrument I'm playing is the Kora, the 21-stringed West African harp lute. Uh-huh. This might help. The 21-stringed West African harp lute. Originally from Gambia, Senegal, Mali, that region of West Africa. Yeah, and it was traditionally played by griots. Griots were not just musicians, but they were also the historians, the chroniclers of the history. It was an oral tradition passed through the generations. They also held the genealogy and the socio-political history of the region.
And how did you become an inheritor of this tradition?
That's a very good question and a long answer. Basically, when I was young, younger, shall I say then, when I was a child, I first heard the kora played by a Senegalese musician, Bouli Sissoko, who was in London visiting from Paris, from France. And that's the first time I heard the instrument. I was probably about 4 or 5 years old. And as soon as I heard the instrument, I was mesmerized by the sound and just drawn into that whole world. And I actually had some lessons from him and a player that he used to work with as well called Kora. Then they left, they went back to France, and they left me with an instrument. So I had an interest in the instrument. I was trying to play it, but obviously difficult without any teachers. And then a kora player from the Gambia called Amadou Bansang Jabati was visiting London, performing. I went to see that concert. He didn't speak much English at the time. He didn't speak much English, actually, later either. But he was performing at St. John Smith Square in London. I went to see him afterwards, and then he invited me to go and study with him in the Gambia. And so at the age of 8 years old, I went to the Gambia to study with him in the Kora and the griot tradition. From then, and then the story continues from there. But that was the beginnings of it.
Now, are the compositions you're playing this evening, or this afternoon rather, this evening for you, are they original compositions? Are they part of a traditional canon?
Yeah. The piece I'm playing at the moment is actually from a project called Moon Waters. It's a new solo core album that I've recorded, but it's not released yet. So actually, this is the premiere of that. All of this material that I'm just playing now. And Moon Waters was this is a traditional core, the one I'm playing. I did an album called Still Moment quite a while ago, and that was on another kora which I developed, had different tunings. And I call that, like, if you like, the postmodern contemporary repertoire of the music that I do. Then I did an album Heritage, which was more exploring the traditional repertoire of the instrument. And this Moon Waters for me is in between the two, because it's the traditional kora, but it is in a different tuning. And so and the material is my own compositions. So the first piece that I played was that was drawn from Maki, which is a traditional theme. Then the next piece was Reflective Moment, and then I went into Moon Waters, which has several. Yeah, so it's quite different from the traditional repertoire. But in this project, I was trying to look at pulling out the counterpoint that we have in the music anyway, but seeing the bass patterns as separate from the, if you like, the treble material, and really beginning to pull out even more of what we do in the kora, which is, pull out the bass patterns separate from the melodies and all of that.
And that's part of the traditional element of kora playing, these interlocking rhythms.
Yeah, and I just wanted to pull that out even more, but in a slightly with new material, pulling out those kind of themes and that way of working, and how far you can go with a melody independent of a bass line being constant, which is the challenge.
And we're getting some questions about the actual technique. Josh writes, does one hand play rhythm while the other plays lead, or are the thumbs playing the lower rhythm notes on both sets of strings while the fingers play the lead?
It's just a magic. It's just like that, no? I guess because you're facing me, you can't see, and if I move it, I'll mess up my sound.
The delicate ecosystem.
Yeah, but if you're looking at it from sideways, I'll do it anyway. Let's see if you can see. If you see sideways, you'll see the parallel sets of strings on either side of the bridge. So what I'm using is just the forefinger and the thumb on both sides. So holding the pole, just forefinger and thumb, and each side has, if you like, the left hand side, I have the thumb, and that's the bass patterns. The right hand thumb is the tenor part, if you like. The left hand forefinger is the alto, and the right hand forefinger is the soprano part. So I can break it down just a bit so you can understand what I'm saying. For example, what I was just like, that's the. That's going on in the left hand thumb. And then the fingers. Yeah. It's hard if you're not in the space, but it's, yeah, it will make sense if you can see it very close up.
It's incredible that you get that much sound out of just a thumb and a forefinger
yeah,
on each hand.
These two, yeah, on each hand.
Well, we'd love to hear some more music. Thank you so much for premiering your pieces for us. Can you tell us about what you'll be playing next?
Yeah, these pieces, funnily enough, because you mentioned tradition, the next set of pieces is also from Moon Waters, but was more drawing from some of the traditional elements. So there were pieces like Alalake that influenced the last section of this, what I'm going to play now. And Masana Sise, which is another traditional. But these themes I've woven into my own compositions. So there's 4 pieces which I'll join together. Yeah, so it starts with Motion Tides, Cascading Waters, then Destiny's Hands, and then By the Will, and it draws from some of the influences of those traditional pieces I've mentioned.
Thank you. Well, I'm sure that I
Excuse me?
speak for absolutely everyone in the audience when I say that was incredibly beautiful. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Now, I'm given to understand you're going to play some cello for us this evening as well.
Indeed, I'm going
So-
to do that next.
So you are a classical musician in the Western tradition as well.
Yeah, yeah. And while I'm speaking to you, I'm going to start moving this slightly, so I prepare for the cello at the same time. Yeah, yeah. No, I studied. Yeah, from the age of 8 as well. Same year I started playing the cello. I was introduced to the cello. It was played in my school. Someone was demonstrating different instruments: the violin, the piano, and the cello. And again, the same thing with the Kora, the sound. As soon as I heard the sound of the cello, I was like, yeah, that sound. Oh, I'm going to do that. I want to play that. It was the sound that drew me to the cello, and I think when I was drawn to those instruments, I wasn't aware. I wasn't even aware of well, I was aware culturally, but I wasn't aware of one being a European instrument, one being an African instrument. It was purely the sound, the energy, the character of that instrument that I connected with. And then later, when you're studying it, that's when you start to see, the rest of it, what's connected with it, what's behind it, the traditions, etc.
But there's, of course, so much commonality between every musical tradition.
Yeah, there is. I mean, funnily enough, growing up, when I was studying as a child, in that period, and it was a different period from now as well, my training on the kora and the cello was quite separate in terms of, I was studying traditionally the kora in a very traditional context. So the repertoire and everything had very distinct ways of doing things, the functionality of that. And the same in Western classical music, it was, Bach, the Bach suites, then all the cello repertoire. And there wasn't really a crossover point at all. Even though musically, in terms of music you can hear things, but there wasn't a obvious crossover point. And I think it was in my teens when I started to get interested in jazz and improvisation and music of the diaspora, basically. That was about 13, 14. And as I started exploring jazz by doing pizzicato on cello and being in a jazz trio with the pitch cello, and then the kora being involved in that, and then it broadened my perspective in terms of the two instruments, not just seeing them within their tradition, but seeing them slightly more outside of that. And then, of course, I was around at that time. There was a jazz scene that was happening at that time. Courtney Pine, the Jazz Warriors. There were a lot of young people, players at that time that were just breaking through. So it was quite an exciting time for that music. But really, it was jazz music coming from UK, coming from London in particular, but from Britain, which had a different sound. It had influences of the Caribbean, influences of reggae, African influences as well, because they had African percussionists. It was a different melting pot in terms of the sound. So I connected with that music and I connected with those musicians. And then that really broadened my horizons and took me towards my voice eventually as a composer. Because my voice as a composer came out of improvisation and improvised traditions and music. I did not really notational. I didn't come to composition through the notational role, even though I played cello and did music, all of that. That's not where my compositional voice came from.
So do you think there was a benefit in having the two traditional approaches to music studied very separately, very much in their own environments before you were able to integrate them? Or do you feel
yes and no. I mean, I think as a young person it was quite schizophrenic, because you're going from inside one world into another and back to the other, and without any connection. So again, really, I think the improvisation, the composition, that was really a way to bring myself back together, like all of my separate parts back to a unified whole, where I could play cello, play kora in a sound world that made sense to me with all of it. That's really, in a way, the motivation because there wasn't any repertoire. There wasn't repertoire where you could be playing cello or strings and kora and whatever together. Didn't exist when I was coming through. So then if it was to exist, one would have to do it oneself.
So for the audience, you've composed music like the Kora Concerto, which combines orchestral music, jazz music with the Kora.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a long journey, but I think the first album I did was an album called Lamentation, and Lamentation was really one of the first. I think it was one of the first. I don't know I don't know historically to say it like that, but really I would say it was one of the first African and Western classical crossover albums at all. And crossover was a term that didn't exist then anyway. Those terms came out of projects that were happening at the time. But it was one of the first. There was another one there was some Pierre Kendenge, a musician in France who was an African musician who also looked at Bach and African music around the same period. But it was very little. That was about it. There was nothing where you were having balafons, koras, and strings and cellos in one album. And that was in '95. That was my first album. And so the journey began from there, through, and then, some albums I do just say traditional music from West Africa, and I focus on that. Others might be a classical album and classical compositions. Others may be bringing those traditions together. So it depends. It depends on the projects have taken me down different roads and different avenues, and I try to explore all of those and pull out, what comes out of those avenues.
Well, I hope everyone in the audience checks out your work. I know I've gotten so much from it myself, and it's been so inspiring to see all the possibilities. So let's give you a moment to set up for the
give
cello.
me a moment. Yeah, exactly.
All right, well, while Tunda is setting up, I'd like to encourage everybody to visit the Autumn Salon archive, where you can see interviews with people like Tunda and get inspiration artistically of all kinds from all different kinds of art from around the world. Also, I encourage you to donate to make this program and programs like it possible in the future. All right, let's check back in with Tunda and see how the cello setup is going. Ready to go?
Good. Okay, I missed what you said probably. So
all right. I'm just saying we're ready to go.
Okay, good. All right. I'm ready to go as well. Good. Okay, so this piece is I've got the mic. Can you hear me still? Yeah. This piece is a piece entitled "Songs of the Eternal." It's an original composition for solo cello, but drawn from my influences of the riti, which is a one-stringed African violin. So this piece is exploring that. Hi.
That was beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I was reminded as you were playing of the Gwembri or Sintir as the
Exactly.
Moroccan.
And I forgot to mention that. Yeah, as well as the African violin, it's also influenced by the konting or the sintir from the lute instrument. Exactly. You can hear elements of that.
And that's got a very driving, sort of deep, hypnotic rhythm that's seems like perfectly suited to the cello.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. They share commonality in their sound world. So
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, no. So the next two pieces I wanted to do is different colors on the cello. Now this next one is called Three Mande Songs, and this is really exploring Mande vocal melodies for solo cello. So it's a different exploration, and then from there I'll go into the elements, which is an original composition drawing from the four elements.
All right.
Was there another question you had?
No.
Oh, okay.
Proceed.
Oh, okay.
Thank
Good,
you.
good. All right.
As you're playing, I was incredibly struck by the range that of expression that the cello has, from this human voice singing, and then previous to that we had this sort of driving bass rhythm, and then it's all contained within this one instrument, and then you're able to evoke that. It's very striking.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's I said that's a piece that was drawn from the Manding vocal traditions, bringing some of those colours, but translated onto the solo cello, repertoire.
Can you tell us something of that tradition?
The Manding, but when I say Manding, I'm talking about that region of West Africa: Mali, Senegal, Guinea, Gambia. That region, that region, the people in that region are known as the Mandinka or Bambara people. They're all Manding, part of the Manding peoples, because a lot of the boundaries, I'm looking at the map that we have in the background, but a lot of the boundaries on the map are colonial boundaries. So you'll find the Mandinka people go across Mali, Guinea, Senegal, that whole region, just as the same with Nigeria. You have Yorubas on both sides of the border of Nigeria. So, and if you find that right across Africa, the borders don't now correlate to the peoples within the continent. And there are over 700 different languages and cultures within West Africa. Within Africa. So the Manding culture is one of 700. To give a context of the
That's incredible.
plurality. Yeah.
And part of an incredible diversity of song traditions and song lines as well.
Yeah, so all of this repertoire that I'm playing from the Kora, and this is just one tradition, primarily that it's drawing from. To give a context.
What will you play for us next?
Next, I didn't play. I'm going to play Elements now, solo cello. The computer went off, which got me a bit scared. But I mean, the screen went off, but it didn't go off. I
On my end, so far, transmission received uninterrupted the whole time.
Okay, good. So I'll play the Elements, and then I'll finish with some Kora, final Kora songs. But I'll play the Elements, which I said is a contemporary composition by myself, exploring the four elements: water, air, fire, and earth.
Outstanding. feel like I need to applaud. That was fantastic. I've never heard. Sorry about that. I've never heard rhythms like that emerging from the bass end of a cello.
Wow.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Now, while Tunde's getting ready for his final set on the Kora, I just wanted to let you all know about a new program coming up in a couple of weeks. I'll be interviewing Grammy Award-winning producer Chris King about his trips to Epirus, Epirus, Greece, where he immersed himself in the folk music there and learned so much about the purpose of music, how it's connected to healing, to the vitality of people, and in his research into the old folk records, the 78s that were made in the 1920s and 30s that led him on this journey. Also about the book that he wrote. We're going to be listening to a lot of these old tracks and discussing much of what makes music connect us to the past, to the present, and how we can begin to resuscitate some of that meaning in our lives. So please don't miss that. Check it out. It's on the events page of the Autumn Salon. And now I'll bring back Tunde and we'll hear some more Kora. Tunda, thank you so much for playing for us this evening.
Thank you.
Your music really, it truly casts a spell, and it's a spell that I wish I could be under more often.
Thank you. No, it's been my first online concert, full online concert, and it's been very enjoyable.
Well,
It's
I'm
been
so
great
glad.
to exchange and have this interchange with you from Autumn Salon.
We hope to have you back in the very
Yeah.
near future. And please tell everyone where they can find out more about your work and listen to your music.
Yeah, the website that's first call, which is www.tundajegedy.org, and then the music is on iTunes, CD Baby, all of those outlets. But
So
iTunes probably,
anywhere
all
anyone
of
looks
it's on
for you,
iTunes. Yeah,
they'll find you.
just under my name.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
All
Oh,
right. Well, thank you very much,
Good.
and
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
see you. Talk to you very soon.
Okay.
Well, thank you everyone for attending, for your support, and I hope to see you all very soon in our future concerts and programs. Please, again, peruse the Autumn Salon archives for all kinds of inspiration and education pertaining to all things our art. So music, architecture, dance, calligraphy, all the world's great arts you'll find some representatives of on the Autumn Salon website, and as well as interviews with great musicians and artists like we had here this evening, Tunda Jegeda. So, I'm Chris Rippey, and I'll see you next time.